Jane Patterson. I'm one of the tutors on the Bartlett Part 3. So thank you for signing up today. I'm just going to do this very quick presentation, 10-15 minutes, to run through the sort of core content of the course. And then I'll take questions at the end, if that's okay. So this is our building, 22 Gordon Street. So we're based here, all the Part 3 tutors are based here. This is the team. We have Maria, our program director, and she also tutors. Then we have Donald, Suzanne, Nick, and myself, who are unit coordinators and academic tutors. And we're supported by Naz and Jamie in professional services, who run all the admin for the course. So if you're doing the Bartlett Part 3 admissions, you might hear from Jamie. So how do we operate? Okay, it's a part-time short course. I think you're probably all aware that to make the most of this, you need to be in an office. So generally that's full-time. And then you're doing this as an additional qualification part-time. You're a candidate, not a UCL student, because of the part-time status. And we work with the prescribed criteria, prescribed qualification, ARB and RIB, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. The way that we structure our course is through 4 units, 1 to 3, which are required to pass before you can submit your Unit 4 portfolio, which is linked to the oral exam. We deliver the course online, but there are some in-person lectures too, and also in-person workshops and events. Part of your portfolio, Unit 4, is supervised by a tutor, one of the 5 people I showed you at the beginning, and we are assessed by professional examiners, or you are. We don't mark, we guide you on the work, we tutor you through it from 4 tutorials, but it's marked by professional examiners outside the Bartlett. And all of that process is peer reviewed by Stephen Brookhouse, who's our current external examiner. So this is how you sort of everything, units 1 to 3 are standalone, and they feed into all the content from those, feed into the portfolio. Unit 1 is a group assignment, whereas units 2 and 3 are individual assignments, but we still run with the study groups. We encourage teamwork through the whole course. The portfolio consists of 3 pieces of work: a CAR, critical analysis report, PDA, professional development appraisal, and RWE, which records of work experience. In-person events, just to highlight, we are based in London, near Euston, and there's a series of in-person events on campus. Workshops, group presentations, a mentoring evening, ARB lecture, and the valedictory lecture. In addition, your tutorials for Unit 4, 4 number of those should be in person, ideally. We can go online if required, but not for all 4. Any question session, oral prep, and oral exams are all leading up to the final examination. So Unit 4 is, as I said earlier, running in tandem with 1 to 3. The case study, we structure around 2 incidents, and we generally ask us to be 1 pre-mobilization, 1 post-mobilization. 6,000 words for 1 project, 8,000 for 2, because if you don't have post-mobilization experience on your current project in the office, you may need to shadow a second project at stage 5, because post-mobilization, mobilization happens generally between 4 and 5. If it's a D&B and the contractor is on board earlier, mobilization can happen between stage 3 and 4 or through stage 4. So depending on your individual project. The PDA is 3,000 words, and the record of work experience is generally 8 PDRs, 24 months, or a certificate of experience. So I've talked about the tutoring and the examiners before. Study groups are really a key part of our course. As I said earlier, the Unit 1 practice is entirely a group activity. They're generally 6 people. And we try and mix up schools of architecture, small, medium, and large practices, different nationalities, different genders, etc. So you will get a diverse group of people, we hope, on your study group. And then in addition to doing the group exercise together in Unit 1, we have study group exercises in Unit 2 and 3 at the in-person workshops. And then we encourage you through Unit 4 to keep that study group going so that you're also liaising with one another about your CAR, your PDA as well. This is a sort of how we view it, a balance. You have practical experience, and everyone should know that the minimum recorded experience is 24 months. Through that 24 months of experience, you have to demonstrate ability, understanding, awareness, and knowledge. And those link to the professional criteria, PC1 through PC5. These can be found in detail in these documents, the document on the left. In addition to the criteria, ARB have recently published competency guidelines linked to their CPD requirement now if you're a registered architect in the UK. And so those are fire and life safety, design and sustainability, which we also teach on the course. So this is just a super quick run through of PC1 professionalism, which is tested in all units. 2 is clients, users, delivery services, which is part of the group exercise, Unit 1, where we're looking at commissioning an architect, and Unit 4, of course. Legal processes, it's PC3, that is tested in my unit, Unit 2, which is building, procurement and legal processes, plus your Unit 4 work. And practice management links back to clients and winning work, so that is part of the group task Unit 1 plus Unit 4. And then building procurement, again, is the Unit 2 plus 4. And in addition to that, we have the core curriculum of the RIBA CPD, which is on the left-hand side of the screen, 10 topics which you have to cover through your CPD plan. And then a lot of the teaching focuses on the RIB plan of work. So hopefully you're all familiar with that. You ought, if you're working in practice, you should know whether you're on stage 2, 3, 4, and ideally you need to get stage 5 exposure. It can be shadowed, as I said earlier, and ideally also handover, again, can be shadowed. However, we do teach all of these stages on the course. Yeah. So we have the criteria, but we're also really interested in other organizations. So the section of architectural workers is an architects union, and they have come and lecture on the course. Obviously, there's sustainability covered by various bodies as well. So it's not just, it's a very comprehensive course. So units 1, 2, 3, as I mentioned earlier, are internally assessed, so marked by the tutors generally, and Unit 4 is marked by external professional examiners. We have our autumn 25 oral in a couple of weeks' time, and some of the faces you see on the screen are our examiners for this year. So they are the people who give you marks, not the tutors. And this is just a quick snapshot of the program starting now. And then January is where the lecture series begins, runs through to June. The summer exam you see on the screen is for the 2027 date, because we are flexible in our program. You can take it over 12 months, so do the exam next November, or you can take it through into the summer 27 exam. That's something, if you do apply, that's always something we ask at interview. What length of course are you undertaking? Yeah. Lecture series is standalone, so if you're just tuning in to hear about that, it runs again January through June, and there'll be a certificate of attendance for that as a CPD item. That's on our website there, the link. So there's just a couple of slides at the end about how we become architects today and in the future, because you may be aware that ARB are in the process of changing accreditation. Currently, this is our system: part 1, 3 years, part 2, 2 years thereafter. Often we have a year out between, the green space, 12 months practical experience, and then obviously when you graduate masters, there's an additional period of 12 months, at least 12 months. And then part 3. Obviously, you can sign up for part 3 immediately after graduating. So if you graduated this summer, you would still be eligible, because you're likely to, you will definitely get the 12 months minimum post part 2 if you started working by now. And then, so that's our current system. If you didn't study in the UK, we are looking for equivalent part 1 and part 2 in other countries. So that's done on a case-by-case basis. So we ask in the application form, we ask what your part 1 institution was, what your part 2 one was. So if that's overseas, you just need to state it and state what actual qualifications you got there. The prescribed exams are the current methodology of translating overseas qualifications into parts 1 and part 2 in the UK. That is with the exception of countries where ARB has a mutual agreement. So there's currently Australia, Hong Kong, New Zealand are covered. And Canada and the States are covered, but they are only covered for fully qualified architects. And the equivalence only applies to fully qualified in those countries. But that's the changing landscape. Currently, the ARB are out for consultation on the Part 1 equivalence. They are ditching these prescribed exams, but currently as tutors in all UK schools of architecture are uncertain what the new prescribed exam is going to look like. It's on the back of these 3 documents: the way ahead from the RIBA, competency outcomes for architects, tomorrow's architects. So that's really the core of the changes academically in the UK. And then CPD, as I mentioned earlier, if you become a registered architect in the UK, it's you as an RIBA member, which I am, there's a requirement to do CPD for RIBA membership. But since 1st of January last year, 2024, the ARB requires all registered architects in the country to have CPD hours. The timeline for that is sort of sketched out here. We're sort of in what says September 25. It's we will be running this course through to December 27. And then another version, if we go back a step, the competency outcomes for architects, the middle document here, sets out academic outcomes and practice outcomes. So the current part 3 will become a course that responds to the practice outcomes from ARB. So this is just a quick timeline of the year. And then also final slide, I think the professional practice is the core of part 3, obviously, but we want you to be critical during the course, and we want you to consider ethical, social, and climate objectives as well. So we're looking for that within the documentation. This is an extract from building design. Part of our unit 3 work was an op-ed article. We asked our candidates for op-ed, and then this is one of the Diego's was published. I think about 5 of the part 3 candidates got this series of columns in BD. Questions today, obviously. I will take that. I'll stop sharing in a moment and I'll take questions. Applications are still open. We have started the course and we have a few places left for our January start, because traditionally this is the first year we've pulled the course start forward to November rather than January, just to get people into the cycle, get people into the Unit 4. They've issued their Unit 4 briefs, the tutorial output. Some people are having tutorials in December, but there was still time to apply for the last few places for a January start. When you do the application, which is via our webpage and MS Forms, there's various things you're asked for there. Thereafter, you have to email your supporting documents, which generally is CD, Part 1 and Part 2 certificates, and UK Right to Work, which is generally a passport. If you don't hold Irish or UK passport, you need to give us a share code as well, which will let us check your visa status. Just on the visas, you must have a valid visa for the entire duration of the Part 3 course. So for some people, they're having to do the exam earlier, commit to doing the exam in the summer next year, or certainly by the autumn because of visa restrictions. After we have all of that, your application and the supporting documents, then there's a short interview with myself and my colleagues, one of my colleagues, which we just kind of run through the 24 months experience usually, and the case study, where the case study is in the plan of work and what Part 3 exposure are you getting. On our website, we have frequently asked questions, so I direct you to that. And then if you go through all that process, the interview is successful, the application, then the interview is successful, we will offer you a place. And I would say accept your place as soon as you can, because we want to, as I said, most of the majority of candidates have started, and you will get, as soon as you accept your candidate agreement, you will get access to all the materials that we've started there. That's my last slide. I'm going to stop sharing. Slides will be available to anyone who would like a copy of them through the Bartlett comms teams who organised this meeting. But it's good to see so many people here. On my screen, I can see lots of participants. Right, so thank you for putting something in the chat there. When is the next course starting? Right. As I said earlier, the course has already started. We had our course introduction on the 3rd of November, which was Monday. However, we do have a few places left. So the real answer is January, I guess. 13th of January, we have an in-person introduction to Unit 1. But in order to attend that event, you do need to apply and register with us and enroll with us prior to the 13th of January. So we will be closing after current applications are currently open, but as I said, they are for the last few places. So when we reach our target number, we will be closing applications. We haven't set a closing date as such as yet. But Nara, does that answer your question? 13th of January is the key date, but I would really urge you to apply. Okay, not joining this year, when would the following one be? So that would start in October 26. And we're likely to be recruiting for the 26-27 program in May, I would say, next year. Okay, hopefully that does answer. But if you're ready, Nara, obviously I don't know any of your background, but if you already graduated, if you've already worked, you can take our course up to summer 27. So it might be a good idea to apply anyway, and then you can always defer a place to the following year. We've done that with a few candidates. Right. So maybe that's answered Nara's question for the moment. Erica, interested in applying. You don't have a confirmed case study, the practice. Yes, I mean, the case study is critical to the program. If there's sort of options for, I don't know your circumstances entirely, Erica, but if you've just started, sometimes if people are new to an office, they don't quite know what the case study will be. We do ask in our application form, we ask for details of the case study, so that we can discuss that in interview. And an interview would certainly help. An interview with the part tutor would certainly help you understand what we require as part of our case study details. So if you want to apply now, and if you're keen to start the units in January, I would say, I would give an idea. Is it going to be residential? Is it going to be a commercial project? And just say to be confirmed. And then hopefully by the time the interview comes around, which will just be a week or two later, then you may have some further details. But the interview with the tutor will help you understand what's required. So Erica, I would urge you to apply in any event if you're keen to get your Part 3 next autumn or the summer after. There's a question about the in-person workshops. Yes, the dates for 2026 have been set. The workshops for each of the units are on a Friday afternoon, and they are on a campus. The same message really is when you enroll, if you apply and enroll on the course, we will give a full calendar at that point. As I mentioned earlier, the first in-person session, which is the Unit 1 introduction, and an opportunity to meet your tutor in person as a group, and an opportunity to meet your study group in person, because that's, if you caught the early part of the presentation, we set up study groups at the beginning of the course, and there's 6 people. So the first in-person event in 2026 is on the 13th of January. So that's a really key one. And then the workshop dates are Fridays. I think they're February, April, and May for the units 1 to 3. But again, you'll get the specifics of that. Right. Then the question about postpone the exam and matching period be deferred. Okay, that's a good question, because we do offer the 2 pathways, autumn 26, which is a October submission, and a November 26 exam, oral exam, or we offer summer 2027. which is a June 27 submission and a July 2027 oral. So that really is the maximum period it can be deferred, because the maximum is 24 months. So if you defer from autumn 26 to summer 27, that's fine. And if you pass everything, that's good. But the reason we build in the extra third cycle, which would be autumn 27, is if you failed anything at the summer 27 oral, you would then have an opportunity to resit in the autumn that year. So that is the maximum period, 24 months really, that you can be on the course. And obviously, it's your choice whether you take the exam. You opt for the autumn exam or the summer following exam in either situation. However, if you opt for the autumn exam initially and something happens, your project gets delayed or something happens in your own personal life, and you need for that reason to defer to the summer 27, that is also possible. We ask that you do so by tutorial 2, because the only difference between the autumn pathway and the summer pathway is the spacing of the 4 tutorials for Unit 4. So you kind of need to keep your tutor informed if you're considering deferring. Second part of the question is about visa types to register for the course. So we take graduate visas, we take skilled worker visas, spousal visas. We obviously, for EU, we have pre-settled or settled status. And we also have youth mobility visas from various countries linked to the UK have youth mobility visas. So we do accept a range, and one of the requirements is that the visa, whichever visa pathway you're on, that has to be valid for the duration of the course, which is when I was saying earlier that some people have to do the exam in the autumn because their visa date is linked to the choice of pathway. So it's that, again, that's on an individual basis. We do check through the gov.uk website for validities for the visa. So if you have if you're overseas candidate, you will have to provide a share code, and we would double check that on this side. Hopefully that answers those questions. Can we register if you've not done part 2 and part 1 exams? Yes, you can. If the qualifications you've undertaken are equivalent of what the ARB considers to be part 1 and part 2 equivalents. So again, in the application form, we ask for your institutions for undergrad and postgrad. So I see you've got a BArch and an MArch outside the UK, which is great. And you've also got an MA, presumably that's in a specialism, which is also a fantastic experience. So it's the part 1 and the part 2 equivalents that we really try and check at interviews. So again, just list it on the form, and that will be discussed, because, as I said earlier, ARB have certain mutual agreements with certain countries. The slight anomaly now is that the masters, if you're a European student, it's the masters they recognise. They don't recognise European part 1s any longer. But they sent about 3 or 4 weeks ago, ARB did a press release about the potential new proposal for part 1 prescribed exam. So that's sort of a moving target for us at the moment. But what their press release said was, if someone has been working in a UK office for 2 years, and the office can write a letter to them, this is out for consultation, of course, they are considering having that letter from a practice of 24 months experience in lieu of asking for the part 1 prescribed exam. Part 2 prescribed exam is still going to be required, but they're also in the process. In my slideshow, I had shown currently the GCs, which are the general criteria which postgrad and undergrad architecture courses in the UK follow. Currently, under the part 2 prescribed exam, you have to provide evidence of every single general criteria. And I think what we've read so far is ARB are considering using competency-based outcomes for the part 1, equivalent of part 1 prescribed exam. Sorry, part 2 prescribed exam. So it is a bit of a moving target, but yes, from what you're saying, Fadel, that you're P-Arch 5-year and your M-Arch outside the UK, and then MA in the UK sounds ideal. So that would be discussed with you. Is any outside UK experience usually counted? Yes, it can be. We generally say one of the rules from the practical experience is 12 months in the UK post Part 2. So hopefully, because this is a hybrid course, lots of in-person events, the expectation is people are working in London or adjacent to London so that they can travel into Bartlett or UCL for the in-person events. You may be working in a UK office, a London-based office, but working on overseas projects, which is fine. The challenge you have in that circumstance is that you have to, in your case study, you have to be able to compare whatever system you are following for your overseas project, the legal system, the contractual system, has to be compared with the UK legal and contractual position. So yes, it's very valuable to have outside the UK experience. And again, if that's the case, we'd still be looking for that to be at a stage 4, stage 5. So again, you've got this exposure, albeit not firsthand or not in the same country, but you have exposure to the procedures for actually building rather than just designing a building. So hopefully that answers the outside the UK experience. You do get additional words, I must note, in the case study. Instead, if it's one project overseas, instead of the 6,000 limit, you would have as a UK project, you would have 8,000 words, which is a buffer to help you explain the differences between your project and the UK system. Okay, so I'm coming down the chat. We have Part 3 schedule. Are there any online sessions in the evenings or weekends? They're not weekends unless it's independently with your study group, but we do have online sessions in the evenings. The lecture course, which begins on the 13th of January, generally is a Tuesday evening, and they run from 6:30 till 8:30, generally online, although the first one, the 13th of January, is in person, and there's a couple of other lectures, or evening lectures, like the mentoring evening, which is the Unit 3 introductions, also in person, and then towards the end of the lecture course, we have a couple of in-person events too, but they would be on Tuesday evenings as well. Zaha, your project's overseas. Yes, potentially. I mean, I think I explained that earlier with Fidel's question, but it depends on the stage that work that is at, and being able to compare the Saudi system with the UK system. So it's something we can discuss, because I think I'm due a reply to you. I know that you've emailed me, so I will reply to that. If for some reason you can't complete by summer 27 at the latest, would you have to enroll again? That's a good question. Generally, the summer 27 is the target last exam. We have just on a couple of occasions allowed people to take it in the autumn 20s, what would be the equivalent of autumn 27, but that's if someone's made redundant, there's various personal circumstances that have made that shift. So it really depends on your circumstances. Summer 27 is 18 months or so away from now. And if you're working through that time, then you will have the experience, practical experience under your belt. You'll have had the teaching on the course, past units 1 through 3, which is a requirement before you do your oral exam. So I think the circumstances, Erica, that you're sort of mentioning, that the deferral are due to things like redundancies, death of parents or grandparents, significant effects, significant events in somebody's personal life can be considered for extenuating circumstances. Yes. So again, if there's a reason, a sort of underlying reason that you might not be able to complete, then, because one of the questions we ask at interviews about reasonable adjustments. If people have conditions that they need extra time for, like dyslexia or mental physical health conditions, then we can set up an agreement at the beginning of the course, giving people extra time and the support they would need. So that's another circumstance where people often defer their exam because of certain conditions they have. But we try and sort of assess that at the very beginning of the course, so it's easier from the candidate's perspective. They know they've got the additional time, and they know they have this agreement with UCL for support, if that's the reason. But yes, the target, if you don't think you can make the summer 27, I would suggest you wait another year and you enroll for the 26, 27, sorry, 20, I remember my dates now. If you applied next year, you would buy yourself more time if you thought you needed that in a way. Okay, I have another question about working visa the past 2 years or international. That's not a problem if the overseas projects are sufficiently advanced. I sort of did answer this someone earlier. We do accept overseas projects, and there's additional word count in the case study to be able to compare the legal and contractual system overseas with the legal contractual system in the UK. And clearly the Part 3 course teaches UK procedures. So you would be taking the lectures, you would be taking the other units context, and you'd be feeding those into your case study. So ideally that project, obviously I don't know how big the project is, and 2 years you would hope that the project would advance beyond stage 2. But again, you can put details of that on your application form, because we ask for specific details of the case study project. You know, what stage is it now, your role on the project, and a kind of outline of it, so that we can talk at an interview about potential incidents, potential pre-mobilization and potential post-mobilization incidents. So hopefully that asks the question. So it's not a problem. You just need, it's a harder work for you, I suppose, because you're having to research, you're having to know your own project plus the UK. But as I said, the teaching of the UK system is what we do in the course. Is it mandatory to work on UK stage 4 or 5 instead of international project for Part 3? No, it's not mandatory. But just as I said there, you do need to, even if you haven't worked on 4 and 5 in the UK, you certainly need to understand the procedures. So we do, my unit, legal processes and building procurement, tends to focus. Legal covers planning, it covers building regulation approval, it covers CDM, covers Part 3 walls, and then it also covers different types of contracts, design and building traditional contracts. It covers, we do one of the Friday workshops on my unit runs through the standard building contract and sets various scenarios for each of the study groups. So you're getting a lot of stage 5 teaching, but you have to, I think if your international project, depends, I think I've said this a couple of times to other people, if the international project is far enough in advanced, then you're comparing the stage 4 or 5 overseas to the stage 4 or 5 here, which we teach. So hopefully that's answered. So it's not mandatory, but you do have to be clear in your documentation what you're shadowing and why. Ideally, what we do say in those circumstances, if you are working on an international project, if the office happens to have a UK-based project that you can shadow, you can observe, go on the occasional site visit, that would really enhance your work. So that's another possibility, to ask your practice whether or not you can shadow. I know it's very difficult because you're obviously resourced to your overseas project and it would be additional time, but you sort of might have to do that in your own time, depending on the circumstances. But hopefully the office would support that if you had exposure to UK, not firsthand, but secondhand or experience to 4 and 5 in the UK would be good too. Visas valid till August. Right, that's a good question. August 26, I think you would mean, Thomas. The office is sponsoring for new skilled worker visa, which is great. It's acceptable if we get a letter from the office verifying that fact. So we would ask for a formal letter on their practice letterhead from a principal or a partner of that office, telling us that they have, obviously, to get a skilled worker visa, they have to be on the sponsorship scheme, and you have to be registered for that process. So that's what the letter would say, and the 3 years will obviously cover you. So you can apply now, you can enroll in January, as long as we have a letter. We'd obviously check your share code and your visa through August, so we have that on file, but we would also have a sort of little red thing on file saying we want the new visa to be evidenced as well. The letter would provide the support for that evidence, but come August next year, you would have to send us a further share code, and we would check that once again. But the 3-year extension sounds good. I mean, the skilled worker visa, if you can get it, great. But I know that they're tightening down on post-Brexit. It's been really detrimental, I think, to the profession, the tightening up of the visa rules. But hopefully, I think moving, potentially you're on a graduate visa currently, and if you're moving from graduate to skilled worker visa for the first time, I think there's still some leeway on the salary. Whereas if you're trying to come into the UK for the first time, the skilled worker visa salary is pretty high for our profession in terms of the salary requirement there. So yes, a letter from your practice would be all that we'd require in that instance. Ruben's project venture an application form mainly for initial interview. Yes, it is mainly for an initial interview, because we need to, through that conversation, Ruben, we get a sense of how much you know about the project, what your role is, how big, we ask questions like how big is the project team? So if you say 3 people, we know that you're very super involved. If you say 30 people, we know that you may have a more minor role. So we ask about the team size, we ask about how long you personally have been involved in the project, whether it's something you're just starting now or whether it's something you've worked on in the past. You can change your case study through the course. Mostly in that circumstance, it's linked with a change of office, which is another thing you can do during the course. If you move from one office to another, you still have to ensure then you have a valid case study project on the cards. So if you're going for a new job and a new interview, you would be wanting to say, I'm enrolled in the Part 3 course, I need a Part 3 case study. But it's also acceptable to continue to do it in your previous office. So there's a few scenarios around that question. You can stay in the same office, you can change your case study because your project might get held up at planning, or the client might decide they're not proceeding with it at that point. There's a lot of circumstances that, so that's really why we build in the autumn 26 through to September 27. At interview, sometimes we put on the interview form autumn 26 stroke summer 27, subject to project progression, because that's something all the tutors kind of get a feel for at the interview, whether the project's going to proceed to site and at what point in the cycle, your Part 3 cycle, that will go to site. So if you're changing the case study, it might be that you continue with the first case study for one incident, and then you introduce a second project for your second incident. That can be another thing. But again, you're at tutorial 1, where we ask for a 25% draft of the car, which is 1,500, 2,000 words. At that point, and the tutorial will be in January if you're on the autumn pathway now. That's a real good opportunity for you to discuss the potential change of case study project with your tutor. You don't want to leave it to tutorial 3 or 4. You do need to sort of have that conversation earlier rather than later in the process, hopefully. Okay, there's a question about visa. April 26, dependent visa after my current one expires. Okay. If my current visa is acceptable to register on the course now, what document do you need? Okay, I think dependent visa we definitely accept. And I think we would just be seeking some, in the same way that I said earlier, for the skilled worker visa, we'd look for a letter from the practice. Potentially, we would just look for evidence that the dependent visa is viable, in the sense of providing evidence of the dependent party, I suppose. But yes, if you are guaranteed to get a dependent visa, we would accept you on the course. So you would need the document, you would need current share code and some sort of evidence that the dependent visa is going to be forthcoming, basically. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Yuki. Ruben's typing, so that's relating to the change of case study. Okay, great, Yuki, thank you. If there's any other questions, I think I've run, I don't think I've missed anything. The chat. Hopefully I haven't. Okay, working on project stage 1 to 5 in your last office. Okay. And a new office this week sounds good. Yes, I mean, I personally, someone who's doing their oral in 2 weeks' time is in exactly that same position. They have moved office, but they're doing their case study on the previous office because they had really good experience 1 to 5. And that's certainly, I suppose the only proviso to that is ensuring that you have access to the documents you would need, and whether or not you're on good terms with the previous office to be able to get access to the information like the fee appointment. Obviously, the drawings, potentially you have copies of drawings you have for your portfolio in any event, but it's more than drawings we need. It's the fee appointment, the kind of planning process, etc., etc. So I think it depends on how much material you currently hold for that project. And the other option, I suppose, would be to do a 2-project car. One, partly, you could do post-mobilizations in your situation, Ruben, on the previous office, because you've seen that through stage 5. And then you can, depending on what you're doing in your new office, if that's a kind of planning stage, you could decide to do your incident 1 pre-mobilization on the new office. So that would also be an acceptable way of progressing with the case study. That helps. A couple of other. Do you need to employ take course? Yes, you technically do. I've been working in collaboration with the UK practice. Could I use the project we've done together as a case study? Okay. So do you mean that are you UK based? I suppose that's would be part of my question, and whether the projects that you've done together are UK projects. Because I've talked a lot about the potential for an overseas project to be, okay, yes, UK projects. Okay, yes, that sounds good. I think the question you might have now is the employment mentor, because generally when people are in an office, employed by that office, we expect the employment mentor who signs off the PDR sheets, in addition to the tutor signing your PDR sheets, they need to be a registered architect in the UK generally. There are a few exceptions to that. They can be a chartered structural engineer, chartered quantity surveyor, as long as they're involved in the projects. But generally, the expectation is the employment mentor is somebody in the office, somebody who employs you directly, and someone who oversees what you're doing. So in your circumstance, we would have to know a little bit more about the collaboration and whether that collaboration is with a UK registered architect. And we would have to sort of understand the link between yourself and that office or that organization. And hopefully, again, the same message about other projects. Hopefully it's a project that is through to site as well, because seeing the project through is going to definitely inform your case study. So we do and occasionally allow employment mentors who are not direct employers, but it depends on an individual basis. So again, that is something that we discuss and we check with you at the interview. Okay, Ruben's happy. Okay, Nara, hopefully I've answered enough of that. If you apply, then whoever interviews you would kind of be asking questions on that for sure. They would want to know what the kind of relationship between you personally and the other organization was, and also details about the project itself. and the exposure you're personally getting to that project. Right. Another question about overseas or inside UK. Ah, that's a really great question. Minerva, I think you are, so not Fidel, so Minerva. One of the rules that the ARB have, this 24 months minimum. Of those 24, 12 months of those must be recently. And how they define recently is within 24 months of taking the Part 3 exam. So you can draw on experience more than 5 years ago, but only up to 12 months in terms of the logbook, the PDRs, whereas the remaining 12 months, and these ideally would be in the UK working for UK practice on a UK project. It can be working in the UK for UK practice on an overseas project as well. But those 12 months need to be within 24 months. So again, depending on when you sit the oral exam. So if you're doing November next year, autumn 26, you should be working now towards that record of experience. You don't need to have the 24 months now. You only have to have the 24 months at the submission. So that's another thing we talk about in the interview. Where are you getting your 24 months from? How is that made up? And it can be made up from your right experience years ago. If you need that, say you need 6 months from 5 years ago to help you get to your 24 months now, that's definitely acceptable. Yes, okay, good. Thumbs up from Minerva. Question at UK, does tuition fee include everything like the exam fee? It does indeed. The only thing it doesn't, so the fourth is £4,000, covers all tuition. It covers the 12 months that I just mentioned to Minerva. The 12 months of logged experience post Part 2 is covered in the autumn fee. So we sign 4 log sheets. If you're doing it over summer 27, we include 6 log sheets in the fee. If you're asking us to do any retrospective signing of sheets, so say the example Minerva had of 5 years ago, if that's not on a PDR sheet at the moment and you want us to sign that, then we would charge £75 per sheet. So that's again something that's mentioned in the interview. We ask you how many you've already done, because people, not many, but some people already got PDRs under the belt. They've done a year out, or they've done a post Part 2 and signed up with like the RIBA, sign PDRs independently. So 4 are covered in the course fee, and then the additional £75 per sheet. The only other additional fee is if you happen to fail one of the units, there is a £300 reset fee. So this year, 2025, we had 100% pass rate on units 1, 2, and 3. And we had about 85% pass rate on unit 4. So and unit 4, you don't fail everything. People just fail one or two components, often the case study or the oral. Irrespective of how many parts of the unit 4 you fail, there's a £300 reset fee. And then just to confirm that the reset, you have to take the reset for unit 4 at the next opportunity. So if you fail in the autumn, you have to do the summer 27 exam. And ditto, if you fail in summer 27, you have to do the autumn 27 exam as you reset. So yes, the tuition fee is inclusive if you don't have additional PDRs or a reset fee. Yes, Erica, you get 10% reduction. You're a Bartlett alumni. So Part 1, Part 2, PhD, any of the master's programs, we also set, as long as your master's is in addition to Part 1 and Part 2 from other institutions potentially, there's a 10% fee. So instead of it being £4,000, it's £3,600. One thing on fees, actually, I'd mentioned, we often ask in the interview whether the practice will support you with fees, because obviously the fee agreement is between UCL and yourself as a candidate, Bartlett Part 3 candidate. We only operate e-store payments, so it's all done through cards, but the practice can contribute to that. Some people have all their pays paid by the practice, some people have half. More commonly, it's half. The candidate pays half, the practice pays half. If someone is paying on your behalf, then you just have to let us know, and you have to ensure that your name goes against that fee so we can allocate it accordingly. If you're paying by 2 installments, the first payment is due by January, the second payment is due by April. If you're paying the full fee in one go, that fee is due in February 2026. So that's another thing. Once you get once you've gone through the process, the application, the interview, Jamie will send you an offer, and on that offer, it gives you various payment. There's separate payment links for Bartlett people with the discount, and there's separate payment links if you pay by one installment or two installments. Why would a practice pay for your fee? Well, they would, because they often want you to become a qualified architect. It's good for them. It's good for the practice to have qualified architects on their books, so they can, yeah. So not everybody, a lot of people pay their own fees, but some are lucky enough to get support from the practice. I think it's an investment in you. Sometimes they come with conditions that you have to stay for a certain period of time or pay the fee back if you don't. So obviously it depends from office to office. But yeah, we have quite a lot of financial support from offices, which I think is good. Obviously, anything, it's a good sign that they want you to take part fee. And will support you financially in some regards as well. So it's worth asking, even if it hadn't occurred to you to ask. I think it's worth asking the question. Apply next week, how quickly we get an interview? Okay, if you apply next week, depending on the days, we do interviews on Tuesdays or Fridays, and we sort of need a 24-hour lead into that. So depending on when we get the app, we try and turn the applications around quickly because we're already kickstarted the course anyway. So if you apply soon, I would say you'd get an interview within 2 or 3 days, hopefully, week maximum. And then at the interview, you will be told whether you have an offer or not, provided we only interview people we think are eligible and that have in the application form, have a writing about the right kind of experience, have their visa in place or provisions for a visa in place, etc. So the interview, most of the people who are interviewed get offer places, and the offer comes the same day, usually. If your interview's in the morning or lunchtime, it will come the same day. If it's towards the evening, it will come the next day. And then what you have to do, it's a very short form, the candidate agreement. Basically, you're saying, yes, you want to take place in the course. Yes, you're going to pay your fees, or someone's going to pay the fees on your behalf. So there's a very short turnaround. And then once you accept the candidate agreement, we would straight away enroll you on the course. We'd give you information about the Unit 4 brief and the tutorial brief. We'd give you the calendar, because a lot of the questions earlier about the actual program and the calendar, the full calendar would be available when you get the candidate offer as well, because that would allow you to decide how you're going to plan your time. Okay, Masters in Italy, it's listed on Annex. Yes, great, Ruben. You need to contact ARB as long as it's on what they call the frozen list, Annex B version 7.1. And luckily you did it that way around, part 1 here, part 2 in Italy, because if you'd done your part 1 in Italy, it would be a problem. But they should, ARB, if you contact ARB, you should get a letter. And then if you send, that will be one of the questions we ask at interview as well. Have you got the supporting letter from ARB? So it's just, yes, it often comes by email, and you just need to give us that evidence as well. The reason we ask for that is if we know that ARB have said yes to your masters, when you pass and you've got your part 1 in the UK, when you pass your part 3, we can tell the ARB you're now able to register on the ARB register, because we always send them a pass list, which are the people who have got part 1, part 2, and part 3 under their belt. Yeah, so that's ideal, Ruben, but you do need to get that in writing from ARB. NARA, yes, that is the current arrangement. Part 1 and part 2 prescribed exam within 24 months, 2 years of completing part 3. That's absolutely correct. What we don't know now is how that's going to change, because obviously the prescribed exams are being faded out and they're being replaced by something else. Yes, as I said earlier, there's been a press release from ARB about part 1 potentially it's out for consultation. So they're gauging the profession's response to it. They're suggesting that Part 1 prescribed exam could be replaced by a letter from a practice saying you've worked in that practice for 24 months and you've worked on architecture in the architectural sector and projects. So that's what we know about the Part 1 alternative to the prescribed exam. The Part 2 prescribed exam will continue, but it will also be replaced by another version of the prescribed exam. What we hope is that they'll obviously adhere to the current rules, which are within 2 years of completing Part 3. So that is the current system, and I can't see they would change that significantly in the future. So we do get a lot of people on the course who don't have the prescribed exams yet. They pass their Part 3 and then they do the prescribed exam, or maybe in your case scenario, it would be the equivalent of whatever the Part 2 test is at that point. Yeah, so that's correct at the time, but it's a bit of a shifting landscape. Okay, great, great. Yes, if you look on the ARB website and the news releases, I think it was the 22nd of October. So that's the latest one about the Part 1. It's not in law yet, but that's what they're suggesting instead of the Part 1 prescribed exam getting a letter from the practice. Great. Okay. Are there any last questions before we end the event? I guess actually on our website, people might not have picked up. We have an FAQ section. I'm just going to get the link for that, and I'll pop it into the chat as well because it's got further questions. Obviously, you've heard my version of things, and there's typical questions here. Yep, if you click on that, it's on our website. And it just sort of runs through the sequence. Some of the questions, about visas, length of practical experience, type of case study project are included on that. Sort of wrapping up now. And in a moment, a couple of people still typing. I'll see if I can get this ARB link on Part 2 as well. Yeah, email for answering further questions is if you just send that to me. So it's j.patterson. Yeah, basically. A link is on the website too, but if you use that one, Nara, if there's any further questions, and I'll try and reply. Obviously, individually on an email, which is good. Great. Okay. I think we're maybe done with the questions. New message. Thanks a lot. Bye.